Welcome to my RPG bookshelf. I am everweird, and this is where I take a look at the games, supplements, and adventures on my shelves and determine how I'm using them and if I want to keep them on the shelf. So I'm looking at Powder and Brimstone. This has been quite a difficult book for me to talk about in any clear and, I think, objective way. I've described that my motivation going into doing episodes on my bookshelf is not to do a review of the book and to stay away from saying whether this is good or bad, but merely what's working for me in that book and is enough working for me that I want to keep it on my shelf. And for whatever reason, I keep veering into criticism of this book. Whenever I try to do this, I've literally shot this video maybe 8 times at this point. And I'm just going to try to stick to my notes, that my bullet pointed list of how do I talk about something on RPG Bookshelf. So what is this? This is a compatible with Mork Borg game. It is a standalone game. It is not a supplement for Mork Borg, although it is certainly compatible with it and like portable in that sense of you could use this to play in Mork Borg adventures, or you could take Mork Borg classes and put them into this world, anything like that. But it is its own thing. It does not take place in the world of Tfeland. It is its own setting, universe, group of rules, classes, etc. And it is by Benjamin Tobit. And yeah, let me jump into it. Benjamin Tobit did all the art and the creation of this, all the writing, everything is from Benjamin Tobit. It is very much laid out like Mork Borg in that it has end papers that give you quick rules and quick tables, as well as an index. And then it starts out by describing the world, very much in the Mork Borg vein of going through the areas of this world. This takes place in the Vaterlanda Empire. This is an empire that is in the throes of a puritanical war between the Orthodoxy and the Puritans. So something really anybody with any country that has been enwrapped in the wars of a religious nature between two people who generally agree on stuff, but still want to have things their own way. So a very familiar and kind of spooky setting. I mean, we as Americans are going to think of it like leading to the witch trials. Europeans, I assume, have your own version of witch trials and things like that. World map, the areas on it, and then each area of that described. The art has this really dark, big bold colors, but very dark and shadowy and deep blacks. This is very reminiscent of Mike Mignola and his creation of Hellboy and like the work in that world. If anything that I would take issue with here, and certainly it impacts the clarity of the text, is that this particular serifed font here is quite hard to read, and you can see all the fonts are at a small size. This is difficult for me. I would prefer big and clear fonts, but I will praise this book for not falling into the trap that so many Mork Borg supplements do, which is like over-grunging something or like trying to make it more graphic design than legible text. Everything is pretty clearly laid out, even if it's a bit smaller than I would like. So it goes through this world, which I think is really great. It's a world that I would want to explore. I am engaged with those stories of an orthodoxy and a Protestantism duking it out, and how do the little people fare under what's essentially just a battle for power wrapped in superstition. These are stories that I think make for engaging play. I think there's great background on the churches, and it's just flavorful enough to give you ideas about it. There's a detailed layout of the factions in here. There's some really cool ones, like having the staggering pox as a faction, which is basically sort of a zombies that rise because of a disease that's on them. It's got all the elements for you, right? We get about 32 pages into it. Here's a great spread of just some art that's inspirational. And then on page 30, we hit the rules for the game. If you've watched my episode on Into the Odd, you'll note that I called out something in Into the Odd that appears right in the introduction, which is you are an adventurer and you are out for riches and finding arcana and power or treasure. It tells you what you're doing. We've gotten 30 pages into this world, and I don't know what the characters are doing in it. Are they in the Orthodoxy? Are they on the side of the Puritans? Are they a third party running beneath those and playing the factions against each other? Are we just merely trying to survive while all of these factions are warring over top of us? I don't know, and I don't have a direction for the game there. I've already touched a little bit on the the portability of this. Certainly, these 2 pages here are going to, if you're familiar with Mork Borg, you're going to recognize this exactly, because this is like, if not straight out of their SRD, this is so close to the way that it is all described in Mork Borg. So this is instantly portable, like I said, into Mork Borg and Mork Borg stuff into this. It's great. And because it has that kind of old school feel of Mork Borg, I think it's really easy to pad out your bestiary here with monsters from Mork Borg, or even from just old school D&D. Like, your HP is generally more or less going to make sense over here. You might have to tweak a little bit once you're in the battle, but as a GM, it's really open and easy to understand. In Mork Borg, all those rolls to hit and to dodge are player facing, so you don't really need a lot of monster stats, because when you attack as a monster, the players are rolling to dodge rather than you rolling to attack. So you don't need an extra 2-hit stat there or anything. And generally speaking, like, the saves are player facing and all that kind of stuff. So it's really portable there. I've touched on, like, how would I or do I use it? And the answer is I don't. I kickstarted this. I was getting the PDF, obviously, earlier than the book was delivered. I was really excited to get the book earlier this year, I guess. But as I mentioned earlier, not only do I not know what the mission is for the players, I don't really know as a GM how to get into it. So when we get into the GM section, 90 pages into the book, here are hooks for a dark caper. And this is the first time that I'm hearing that we're on a caper. RPGs use different descriptors for what that adventure is. Like, is it a job? Is it a score? Is it a delve? Here I'm hearing caper, and I'm thinking like, oh wait, we're on a caper? Are we like thieves or something? I don't know. But here are some hooks, and they're flavorful, certainly, but I wouldn't call them hooks exactly. There's a god in the lake, and it demands sacrifice from the locals. Okay, why do I care? Like, did it come after me and my friends? Am I a local? There's a little bit too much there. It might give me flavor, but it's not pulling me into the world and telling me what these adventurers are going to do. Likewise, there's an adventure generator, and you can just sort of go through these tables, which are really spark tables. They're going to excite your imagination and have you thinking of things. You receive your task from a sarcastic talking skull. Great. The reward is going to be valuable information. Okay. If you fight for a dangerous monster, so where am I going here? How does this line up with the factions and the orthodoxy puritanical war going on? I don't know. Although there's room generators and like spark tables for that and the unique aspect, or there's treasure tables, inn names, things like that, I'm still left with this question of, well, what is my mission? What am I taking these players through? Do I want to just send them through dungeons? How do I capture that puritanical orthodoxy conflict in my game? These things could excite your imagination, and you know exactly how to run it, and that's great, but it doesn't do that for me. And so in my opinion, there's a lot of optional rules and things like that in here that could have been thrown out, and it could have just used the bare bones Mork Borg rules and instead filled those pages with ideas for getting players and getting the GM invested in this world and building that story and those adventures. For example, just to highlight a couple, there's a position and impact here, which the author credits as coming from Errant. It also feels very much like Blades in the Dark and their position and effect. This is a thing I find utterly useless in a game like Mork Borg, because Mork Borg uses all the polyhedral dice. It is, in that way, simulationist. When you do 8 hit points of damage, that's your impact. You do 8 hit points of damage. You don't need a squishy fiction first, like story game way to talk about what's your impact. Your impact is 8 hit points. Likewise, your position, you can easily just abstract as saying you have advantage or disadvantage, or using the DR rating to change what that position is. If your position is difficult but not impossible, it's a 14. You don't need to describe it as shaky. It's 14. That's the beauty of simulationist games, is that narrative can emerge from the hard details in it. Not everything needs to be squishy. There is, in the GM section, a borrowing of countdown clocks from Blades in the Dark. Timers are great in RPGs, but I don't know that countdown clocks make sense in this game. And what I see through a lot of this, and like there's optional combat rules, there's rules for mounted combat and chase sequences and things like that. And what I see in that is a distraction from the simplicity of Mork Borg, where rulings, not rules, triumph in Mork Borg. I don't need a system to roll a chase in Mork Borg. because I'm just going to say, okay, make an agility check every couple of rounds to see if you can get away from the monster. Success means success. I don't need this procedure here. I mean, procedures are great in old school games. I don't think it's entirely unnecessary or something, but there's nothing in this game that tells me why I'm going to be in a chase. Is there more about this game that's going to have me in mounted combat or in a chase sequence? And that's why I need these additional rules? I don't know. It's not in there. All right, so this is future me coming in to just add a little bit of context around some of my criticisms to Black Powder and Brimstone. I said that I found it hard to get into this. Well, one of the easiest ways to tell your readers and your players how to get into something is to give them a demonstration of an adventure in that system. And Black Powder and Brimstone does this. So just like in the Mork Borg core book, there's sort of a different quality of paper, almost newsprint quality paper at the end that contains an adventure. The one in Mork Borg's core book I've talked about as being so essential and so informative. It tells you how to run an old school game. It tells you how to run a Mork Borg game. It's really great. And it does this without being overly preachy or teachy about it. Like it demonstrates. It shows, not tells, So let's take a look at the House of Pain and Loss here, as if this should tell me, if nothing else in this book, what an adventure looks like. Is it a caper? Is it an adventure? Is it a delve? What is it? Well, it starts out with, you wander the road from the east to the town of Koch. An iron-gray sky looms above you as rays of light pierce from between clouds heavy with rain. Cold wind blows from the west, etc. More description about your ride into town, whatever it is, or your walk into town. I don't care that it's railroading me, pushing me into a town. Fine, that's how a starter adventure should go. You're doing this. This is just a quirk of whatever neurodiverse qualities I have. But I literally read these 2 pages 4 or 5 times trying to figure out, what are we doing? I kept skipping. I kept reading the notice board, but just sort of like ignoring it. And I can only kind of assume that maybe that's what a player would do. As they walk into town, they're going to find a corpse. They're going to see this hanging body, and they're going to see this notice board. You as the GM are going to call this out. Notice board has several pieces of paper nailed to it in a haphazard fashion. Many of the older ones are appeals for help and charity. Others notices of new taxations. The ones most freshly pinned to the wooden board are notices of missing persons. All of them are women. That's the hook. The very last of 3 sentences in this little thing, it's a real burying the lead moment. What I was seeing as I kept rereading this was I'd sort of read that, and then I would get to the priests, and I would find that this one priest laments the missing people, and I guess I was approaching this as a player and thinking like, well, if my GM read me this, my GM, takes me through this encounter, and I go, okay, well, I'm not interested in searching for missing people. I don't have any reason to do that. I'm not like hooked into it. There's nothing in my character backstory that cares about that. I've pitched them this setting of Puritans and Orthodoxy. There's missing people. Okay. Why? Who cares? That was sort of, I think there's a real wisdom in how I was reading this in an ADHD brain. Even though I'm skipping over the thing I'm most meant to pay attention to, there is a real wisdom there that's what your players might do. Now, to contrast that, let's look at the starter adventure in the Mork Borg core. First sentence, you face execution for heretical theft, but a masked seer, a courtier of the Shadow King, offered you a chance at life. That's your motivation. That's your whole adventure. That just tells you exactly where you are, why you're here, and how you have a chance to get out of it and go have an adventure. So you got to go have this adventure or you're facing execution. Done deal. Whereas this puts you in a town and you can think, well, I don't care. I don't want to find those missing people. Okay, so you're pulling those players in to say, please go have this adventure around missing people. At that point, there's only one stop that you make. You go to an inn, you meet this man named Tofold, and he states that people go missing at night, first only vagrants and ne'er-do-wells, and then others from the village started to go. His own wife disappeared last night from their bedroom. So I don't know why you're confronting him in the inn, whatever, it's a location, but this guy should be running out on the street screaming at people like, where is Maria? Regardless. He tells you, I suggest you investigate Count Lethgar's manse at the top of the town. That's it. That's the only place you have to go. So if you don't take the hook about missing people, this adventure goes nowhere. If you don't go straight to that mansion, this adventure goes nowhere. There's no scaffolding here in the adventure to say, what if your players don't do that? And I think this goes along with kind of the squishy rules, the things about position and effect and countdown clocks and some of the advice around gameplay flow and all of the story gaming elements that have been brought in here. When you do that for a game, you're relying on your players to really drive things. And if your players don't drive in the direction of this adventure, then what do you do? So this is, more so than the rest of this video, this is a pretty sharp criticism, I think. This is not good. Like, the locations, they're well done, as far as like the maps and the encounters in them. I mean, and knowing my players, let's say I even get them to the house. I'm dragging them over there saying like, hey, that's the only place, you find the other villagers and they all say, yeah, you should go check in on the count or whatever it was. I already forgot. You should go check in on the count. We suspect the count's behind this. You finally line it up so the players are like, that's where we're going. Then they go here. How many of your players walk in the front door of a mansion? What my players are going to do is figure out how to get in that top floor. Absolutely. So they have a record, undisputed, unbroken record of skipping to the big bad. And that's exactly what they would do here. So I need to give them a reason to go through the house. There needs to be like a series of investigative steps that they're going to take. So some reason that they go call upon this mansion and they don't just run in as kind of a breaking the kidnapping exercise. Because if that's what they think, that all these missing people have been kidnapped, they're just going straight for the top floor. They're not going to mess around with going in the front door. And it's not like it's required in what's written here to go in the front door, but it's definitely set up that your biggest encounter is going to happen on the top floor. Looking at that Mork Borg dungeon, one of the things about this dungeon is, yes, there is only one entrance into it, but once you get in there, there are so many loops through. There are 2 doors to go in. There's a connection between these sort of 2 sides of the dungeon if you go. If you keep pushing in, you're going to end up in that rot black sludge. But if you go over here to hallway number 6, there's a little trapdoor that's going to lead you to the greenhouse. There's another little trapdoor you're going to find that skips the rot black sludge encounter on this side and instead puts you in the back there where you're going to meet the butcher back there. It's a great dungeon that, yes, may feel a little railroady, even though it has given you a motive right at the start. You're already in prison and you're facing execution. You got no choice to go here. Whereas Black Powder and Brimstone offers you a ton of choice that can't be fulfilled without a lot of other preparation from the GM. I think I've said enough about that. I really hope this presents how much I want to give this book a fair shake and say it's a really cool setting, and I just don't know how to get players into it. I'm looking at this in all ways, but the video that Past Me made that I'm inserting this into, I thought I got to give it one more shot, and I looked at that adventure again, and that's what I came up with. I will say just one thing that I think is super inspirational and that I would take away and use in a Mork Borg game is this idea of having a character class as well as like an archetype or a subclass for it. So you make a character in the standard Mork Borg way, and you choose a class like the mercenary deserter, kind of familiar like a fighter role, and it has specific instructions on creating the base stats for that. But then you're going to choose a subclass of a rifleman, a grenadier, or a great swordsman, and you're going to get some additional features because of that choice. So your stats are determined in the same way, but your subclass sets you apart with some features and inventory. The bounty hunter is great. Honestly, every one of these is great. I really love the witch. There's 3 subclasses of the witch. I like the flavor of the witch, especially in this puritanical orthodoxy conflict. I like the way potions are handled in here. There's a little bit more information about using them. I think it's cool to have these ideas of like your witches can make potions and magic items. So certainly like the flavor of the characters is great. The flavor of the setting is great. But what's preventing me from playing it is that actual hook into the game and the feeling that there's a whole lot of rules here that I'm not going to use and that aren't really important to the game. All of that said, I think you can understand this is not staying on my shelf. If you are into this game and you've got an idea for that hook, how to get yourself into it and your players into it, this is a quality book, but it's just not speaking to me, and so I'm not going to keep it on the shelf. I am everweird. This is my RPG bookshelf where I talk about how I'm using the RPG games, supplements, and adventures on my bookshelf. Whether you want to listen to this or watch it, it is a podcast available on all podcast platforms. or a video playlist available on YouTube. I also do a solo delve of a mega dungeon called Gunderholfen using the BECME D&D rules from the 1980s and 90s. That has been such a great training for myself on how old school play works, what it feels like to delve in a mega dungeon. I've learned so much as a player and a GM doing that, and I just continue to enjoy it, and I hope you'll join me and check that out. It is also a podcast and playlist called Dungeoneering Done Dirt Cheap. But yeah, if you're here on my YouTube channel, you can easily find that stuff. So till the next time I grab a book off my shelf, thanks for joining me.